I want to go back to 1 John chapter 2 this evening. 1 John chapter 2, and we're going to begin with verse number 15, a rather familiar part of 1 John, but an important one as well, and it's going to dovetail probably pretty closely with the prayer meeting talk on Wednesday evening this past week with the issue of holiness and what God requires of us, and this whole idea even of syncretism and trying to combine the things of the world and the holiness of God and somehow navigate through that, and the struggle that can be sometimes. And so let's look at these few verses here, 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 through 20. Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, and the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world passeth away, and the lust thereof, but he that doeth the will of God abideth forever. Little children, it is the last time, and as ye have heard that Antichrist shall come, even now are there many Antichrists, whereby we know that it is the last time. They went out from us, but they were not of us. For if they had been of us, they would no doubt have continued with us. But they went out that they might be made manifest that they were not all of us. But ye have an unction from the Holy One, and ye know all things. We're going to conclude there with verse 20. I want to speak to you for a little bit this evening on this issue of the big disappointment. The big disappointment. Really, life is full of disappointments, I suppose. We have a whole variety of things that we face from week to week or even maybe day to day. And some of them are pretty costly. We had counted on this, or we thought that was going to come through, and it just never did. Not too long ago, a neighbor of mine was talking with me. Actually, he was our landlord at that time, and he was telling me about this property that he had bought. It was along a little lake, pretty small. I don't know if you almost couldn't hardly call it a lake maybe, but anyway, this property was there, and he was telling me about it a little bit. It should have been a welcome getaway for him and for his wife as well, and they could kind of just go down there and relax a little bit. But actually, as it turned out, the most welcome part about the getaway was when he could get away from it. He was able to unload it and sell it. He took a loss for it. But the thing was, after he had bought it, without realizing what all was involved, he discovered that there was all the red tape and apparently even some costs associated with it on an ongoing basis, I guess, or something, possible, financial obligations anyway, that he had not bargained for. And in the end, again, I think he lost thousands of dollars on it, but I think he was relieved to get rid of it. That's the way he indicated to me, at least. Some disappointments are pretty tough. You had high hopes, and then it didn't come through. And really, the devil is in the business of doing that. He makes things look appealing at first. Everything looks good, and surely this is going to be just what I want. And millions have fallen for his schemes, and it looks so pretty out there. The billboard idea. But the Scripture refers to it in Proverbs 9:17. Actually, the first part of it, that's what people see. Stolen waters are sweet. And that's what Satan's banking on. But they don't read the end of the verse, or we don't think about the end of the verse. What else is mentioned here? Or actually not the end of that verse, but the next verse, the context there. What does it say? It goes a little bit further. But he knoweth not that the dead are there. Okay, so you see that it's looking nice until you see the end result. You don't know, you don't see what is happening. And there are a variety of other stories, various legends and things of those. It looks like everything is just fine until you see what the fine print says, so to speak. You see what else is involved. And there's always a painful side to sin's offer. Sometimes, many times, it may be here. But it also certainly will be in eternity. Of course, you and I face the temptation to straddle that decision. Am I going to go with what sin puts on the billboard, so to speak, or what Satan lays out there for me? Or am I going to go with God? And again, if you've been in the church long, You probably are feeling like, well, I have to go with God. I can't miss heaven. And yet there may be that pull to go with the world. But we have to recognize what John is telling us here, that this is not, all those things, the things of the world are not of the Father, but of the world. And we need to recognize that there is a whole spirit of Antichrist that is saying we can just, as we talked about on Wednesday, we can just have kind of sync these two ideas together. We can have syncretism where I pull the things that I want from the world, but I pull the things that I want from God, and I blend them together, and God and I have this worked out. You know, we have a deal made, or whatever else they say. There's a lot of ideas like that. If you've been out much talking with people about the Lord, you'll discover there are some that they think God has an arrangement especially for them, and they can do what they want to. But I'm here to tell you, the Scripture is very clear here that we are not to love the things of this world. We are not to just try to blend in those various aspects. And I know these days it's a lot about tolerance. And well, you know, what's true for you may not be true for me. And all of those ideas of relativism. But I'm here to tell you, God makes it very clear in His Word that we must stay away from those things of the world. Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. And it mentions here the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. He says that's not of the Father, but it's of the world. We are suffering from a plague of syncretism, a plague of blending these things together. And I can just kind of make my own, build your own religion type of thing. And people don't really care so much if you're a Christian, so-called, quote-unquote Christian, as long as you don't really stand for anything, as long as you live and let live, and maybe even sometimes dabble in the pursuits of this world. Sometimes we feel like we can sort of take a little more of the world than what we really should. And I suppose through the years I've used a little example. I think told the children or young people one time, used it in a little club of some sort maybe, and I took, fact is I used it in a sermon before, I believe, but I took a little dropper and I went to the toilet and I just sucked up a little bit of water out of the toilet. And then I had a bottle of water and opened it up. It was brand new. Opened it up and just dumped in a little bit of that, or squeezed in a little bit of that water from the toilet. Now, how many want my water? Oh, it doesn't take more than a few drops, and we're thinking, oh, no way, I don't want that. But sometimes we have the idea that somehow we can just take a little bit of the world, and we're still pure. But the lusts of this world are antichrist, and they will always bring disappointment. The world cannot satisfy us, and it brings pain as well. So let's just touch on several things here quickly this evening on this issue. The first one I would notice with you are the distractions of the world. And there certainly are a number of distractions. John here categorizes them in some of the different things that are apt to get us sidetracked, and it's our flesh, it's our eyes, and it mentions the pride of life. Maybe we would think of that sort of in that issue of prestige or power, pride, of course, rising up, being important, and all those things. And so really, I mean, we go back through, and I guess it's fairly simple to explain. We could think of that flesh, the lust of the flesh. Obviously, that would be in the area of maybe sensual or moral or even immoral pursuits. That's the things of the world. And then in the area of flesh, and then the eyes maybe would be in the area of covetousness and greed and looking out for what you can find. It's the eye gate and what we're seeing and what we want. And then, of course, the prestige or power that I've already indicated there as well. But isn't it amazing that so much of our distraction from the will of God comes from just 3 categories? I mean, we might think, oh, well, there's a whole variety of us. And we have a whole variety of different, issues that we deal with, different temptations. But it really comes down to 3: the flesh, the eyes, and pride, the pride of life. It's true. So often we get caught up in one of those areas. Now it might delve off. You might say the trunk of the tree, and there might be other aspects to that, but that's what it really comes down to. And I've pastored long enough to see the problem of those distractions over and over again. One or the other. Oh, again, maybe it doesn't seem to be quite so dramatic whenever, it's lived out day by day. But if you start digging down, that's why. That's why they live like that. That's why they make those choices. That's why their priorities are this or that. It's because of that very issue, one of those three in many cases. We can claim we're all in. And that can be even maybe a testimony. Maybe it's not said that way very often. I think I have a shirt maybe says something like that for youth camp or whatever. And we're all in, and that's great. But are we? Are we truly, or are we distracted by these different things? Oh, that God would let us see the distractions of our lives like He sees them. Distracted by the allurements of this world that turn out to be such a disappointment. And there are so many that have gotten what they thought they wanted and realized they were wrong. That's not what they wanted after all. So we have the distraction, but we also have the damage that the world does as well, the mindset of the world. So let's look at that for just a little bit as well. And really one of the common examples in Jesus' ministry along this line probably would be the rich young ruler, wouldn't it? He comes to Jesus, he thinks, I'm going to be commended. Jesus is going to really think I'm great. And he asked him, what do I have to do to get to heaven? Probably, in my mind now, this is my own commentary on it, but I think he's expecting that Jesus is going to say, hey, you're good. I wish I had more disciples like you. You're doing what you're supposed to do. I kind of think that's what he had in mind. But is that what Jesus said? No. Actually, go back to what we were just talking about. And yeah, he had a distraction as well. His worldly possessions. And he wasn't ready to give them up. And it was doing damage to his soul. Beneath that honorable exterior lay a worldly heart. He had another God in front of him, or in front of God, in front of Jesus. And he could not give it up. At least from whatever we see. He went away sorrowful, so he, at least at that moment anyway, did not come to the Savior. And really, even Jesus was sad at this hindrance in this man's life, the damage it was doing to him. He was holding on to the world. Yes, the world has plenty of distractions. It can get us off track. But we need to recognize sometimes the awful damage that it does to us. Because so often we almost feel like, it's really not that bad. And it might not be the best, but it's still pretty good. And I think, God's going to understand, and I'll be all right, and it won't really be a problem. But when we place the values of this life ahead of the values of the next life, we are doing damage. We are suffering damage to our souls. As Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, we can't serve God and mammon, or in other words, the riches of this world, the pool, the various things the world has to offer. Adam Clarke observed it this way. Let me read this to you. It's just very brief, but he says, "He who gives his heart to the world robs God of it, and in snatching at the shadow of earthly good, loses substantial and eternal blessedness." So what he's saying is that when we choose our master and we choose to go with the world, we're really robbing our own soul of the good that God's presence would do in our lives. You and I may think that we're unaffected by the world. And we know the terminology, we're to be in the world but not of it. And that's true. That's what we're supposed to be. And we know the terminology. We feel like that's the way we are. Oh, yes, I am in the world but not of it. I am a Christian. I serve a heavenly master and all those things. But do we really? How much are we suffering the damage of this world? How much do we claim to love God most but then arrange our priorities to align with our worldly desires? It's doing damage to us if we're not completely sold out to God. And again, it is the spirit of Antichrist that rises in this world. What is Antichrist? We might think of the mark of the beast and those types of things that the book of Revelation does tell us about. But the spirit of Antichrist is that worldly push. I want my way. I want to do my things. I want to have my pleasure. These three, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, that is the spirit of Antichrist. It does damage to our souls. But I mentioned at the beginning, I wanted to talk to you about the big disappointment. And so let's touch on that final D here this evening, the disappointment of the world. In verse 17 here reminds us, the world passeth away and the lust thereof, but he that doeth the will of God abideth forever. There is coming a day when all the possessions, all the trappings of this world are going to pass away. They'll be burned up. The flesh will be destroyed, and the only riches will be those that are found in God. If we've lived our lives for the things of the world, then they'll be burned up. And what a sad day of disappointment. What a sad thing to recognize that somehow I've missed it. I haven't been what I ought to be. I haven't valued those things that are really valuable. And they burned up. Now, I'll confess, there's some of this that I don't have all laid out completely, because it seems as though there are two different types of judgment. And one is whether or not we went with God. And the other is, did I really live with the right priorities in mind? And I don't have all of that laid out. Obviously, there are some choices that we make that damn us to hell. But there are some other things that even though we may be a Christian, maybe we weren't making God's kingdom as prominent in our lives as they ought to be. And so I don't have all of that laid out, but we need to be careful that we are not choosing those things of this world, those things that will not satisfy, the things that will be burned up one day. And so far, maybe we've dealt mostly with the possessions of the world, but let's not forget that whole, I guess we could say, humanistic mindset, at least worldly mindset. Maybe it's not always making ourselves God, but really that's about what it comes down to, so we probably could say it either way. But people profess to be wise, and they make their bold statements about their ideas of truth or lack of it. But someday God's going to set all that whole worldly mindset right. He's going to say, this is truth. Fact is, I don't know that he'll have to say. Just being in God's presence, just knowing His holiness, knowing what really is ultimate truth, I think we'll understand that in the day of judgment. And so whether it's those things that we're pursuing, the possessions, all the various things of that sort that will be burned up one day, or if it is those things that we're confronting in the area of truth, or again, maybe our own view of truth, we'll see it truth. We'll see it right. That's probably not the best way to say that, but we'll see it as it is. And people who thought they had life figured out will realize how wrong they were. John warns here about this spirit of Antichrist, the Antichrist influences that would rise in the world. They're real today. They really are. Could I just urge you, even here this evening, resist that whole mindset. Resist that idea. Don't allow a little bit of worldliness to taint what God would like to do in your heart and life. Go with God completely. He is certainly not a disappointment, and we can trust Him even this evening. Well, Jesus made it clear. So we bring it to a close here this evening. He made it clear, I believe, was it in the Sermon on the Mount maybe? He made it clear that we have to love God with our heart, soul, mind, and strength. It may not have been the Sermon on the Mount, but in His ministry, he taught that. You can find it, I think, in more than one gospel. You can see that we are to love God completely. And I know we embrace that in theory. We may feel like that's the way we believe, but do we really live it? Or does the world have a pretty strong hold on us even now? What do your priorities suggest is really your purpose in life? Do we really love God with everything? Or do we love the world? Lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, pride of life. We're just on the cusp of revival. Just about, whatever it is, a couple weeks. Beginning revival. And really, revival itself is about getting honest with ourselves, letting God point out our misplaced love, letting God start dealing with those aspects of the world that may have too great a hold on us. And so this evening I urge you, allow God to speak to your heart. Do we love Him with everything, or do we love the world?